and I'm gonna pull daddy's checks out and cash them and hunt and fish. What you got cooking?
Neon hisses like a wounded serpent above the last honky tonk on Lower Broadway, its bruised glow splashing across barstools that still remember every confession whispered into their cherrywood grain. The tourists are long gone. The mop water smells like regret, and the jukebox croons a warped verse about heartache that once bought Cadillacs, ranches, and divorce settlements. Today, though, the real chorus isn't vinyl. It's the ghostly clink of pill bottles, the paper-thin sigh of envelopes stuffed with powder, the quiet rattle of pocket change exchanged for a moment's hush. We're prying up loose floorboards to see what really fueled country's greatest anthems, and the stories don't start politely, nor do they end with a bow. The sticky floor still echoes with boots that belong to outlaws and ingénues alike, and if you lean close you can almost taste the salt of tears fans cried when their idols crashed. Above the bar hangs a faded photograph of Hank shoving a suitcase toward a train porter, handwritten on the back. See you on the other side of the song. Dust drifts through the spotlight like powdered ghosts, and every speck carries a rumor too wild for newspaper print. That's the atmosphere you're breathing, thick, sweet, and dangerous as a basement still. Outside, a stray dog howls along, as if rehearsing harmony for the tragedies we're about to unbox beneath this flickering marquee. First to step from the shadows is Hank Williams Sr., slumped in the back seat of a midnight Cadillac slipping through an Alabama snowstorm, morphine vials tapping against an empty flask, while the driver prays the legend survives one more state line. By sunrise, America's brightest writer is nothing but a headline, and every steel guitarist in Nashville discovers that grief doubles ticket sales. Years later, his son, Hank Jr., inherits more than a surname. He inherits a craving, trading teenage fame for jug after jug of liquid courage. A drunken fall off Ajax Mountain shatters his skull, yet he crawls back to the mic with scars hidden beneath his trademark hat, roaring louder than the tragedy that nearly ended him. The family recipe clearly measures talent and turmoil in equal shots. Reporters later discovered a handwritten set list in Hank Sr.'s coat pocket, songs he never lived to debut, each lyric bruised with premonition. At the funeral, Roy Acuff whispered, "The price tag was stapled to every note he sang, we just ignored the receipt." Hank Jr. filed that warning away until fame felt like handcuffs. He once claimed whiskey numbed the tinnitus of applause ringing too loudly in his ears, and the mountain fall taught him that painkillers may dull bone ache but cannot quiet doubt. Fans flocked to see the scars as much as the music, proof their own wreckage might someday sparkle the same. Waylon Jennings snatches that battered torch and pours pure rebellion over it. Studio legend says he flushed 25 grand of coke down a Music Row toilet while federal agents battered the door, a waterfall of white vanishing faster than a top 40 chorus. Bank accounts flatlined, but danger sold out arenas, and fans shouted for more. Close behind walked David Allan Coe, prison ink glistening like oil slicks under the footlights. He bragged of sleeping in a hearse, dealing speed in rest area parking lots, and spinning outlaw myths so wild even bounty hunters bought tickets. Together they proved rebellion was worth more than radio royalties, even if it left accountants shaking their heads. Waylon later joked that flushing the stash was the most expensive encore in history, a porcelain hit single. During those outlaw sessions, his heartbeat raced so hard against the click track that engineers feared the microphones would pick it up. Coe, meanwhile, boasted he wrote hits on motel ceilings, taping the paper above the mattress so he wouldn't have to sit upright during 3-day binges. He turned every scar into merch, selling t-shirts emblazoned with mugshots to teenage rebels who hadn't tasted a speeding ticket yet, let alone a cell block. Billy Joe Shaver never cared for delicate diplomacy. He shot a man outside Papa Joe's Texas bar, tipped his hat to responding deputies, and later wrote a gospel tune about forgiveness while awaiting the verdict. Doctors warned his heart sounded like loose drumsticks, but the wiry poet still swapped backstage passes for painkillers, claiming inspiration needed a stronger spark. Merle Haggard watched the spectacle from the wings, remembering San Quentin nights and the sweet burn of white rails after parole turned a convict into a chart topper. Haggard could croon about Mama's prayers while hiding a rolled dollar bill in his boot, proving sincerity and indulgence can harmonize when the crowd begs for authenticity. Shaver's trigger pull became county court legend. 9 jurors reportedly hummed one of his songs during deliberation. He walked free, shook the victim's hand, and quipped that forgiveness was cheaper than hospital bills. Haggard, remembering barbed wire and guard towers, visited junior prisons to warn kids that rhyme schemes can't outright rap sheets. Yet even he confessed in a late-night interview that every sober morning felt like punishment for the party before, and he sometimes missed the clarity of chaos. Across town, George Jones is due on stage at 8. Yet the only engine roaring is a lawnmower crawling toward the liquor store after someone hid his car keys. The clerk extends a bottle on credit. Jones repays with an autograph and another tabloid headline. Coke keeps his pulse jittering like a misfired snare. Marriages collapse, cars crash, but that voice digs deeper trenches of sorrow on every record, turning personal disaster into platinum. His sometime duet partner Tammy Wynette counts her own scars, drifting through hospital corridors with painkiller drips humming harmony. When faceless attackers allegedly abduct her from a Nashville mall, skeptics whisper it was just cover paint for bruises left by a possessive husband manager. She keeps singing about standing by your man, even as tabloids question which man stands by her. Jones finally checked into rehab after waking up on a stranger's couch with a concert ticket still tucked in his boot from a show he never played. Counselors taped his gold records to the group therapy wall as incentives, but he ogled the streetlights outside like they were shot glasses. Tammy's medical charts read like a tour schedule. Back injections on Monday, stage lights on Tuesday, emergency room Wednesday, Grammy rehearsal Thursday. When critics dared call the abduction story fiction, she replied that pain has many disguises and nobody wears all of them as well as a performer. Keith Whitley raises the mic next, honeyed baritone masking a bourbon storm that begins before breakfast. He tells friends tomorrow he'll quit. Tomorrow shows up with another glass. Medical examiners later read his blood alcohol number aloud and paramedics curse under their breath. His widow translates grief into a radio rocket that cements his legend, selling tragedy as timeless romance. Not far away, Johnny Paycheck snarls into a dive bar, fires a warning shot at a mouthy patron, and lets lawyers blame it on a cocktail of rage and stimulants. He trades his stage suit for prison denim, then writes an album behind bars that proves outlaw credibility never truly expires. Whitley's bandmates recalled sound checks where his breath fogged the microphone with bourbon fumes, but the notes rang true, slick as icicles. The record label mailed him a plaque the week he died. It arrived leaning against his front door like a silent apology. Paycheck, on parole, performed for fellow inmates wearing prison blues that matched the spotlight gel, each chorus punctuated by clanging cell doors. He left the stage drenched in sweat and irony, muttering that no sound system in the free world matched that reverb. The man in black strolls in like midnight thunder. Johnny Cash crams his suitcase with little white tablets promising eternal dawn and heads for an Arizona desert where talking coyotes heckle the sunrise. A camper exhaust backfires, thousands of acres ignite, and Cash shrugs while federal agents tally the damage. He sings about sorrow and redemption in the same breath, walks into Folsom Prison with a grin sharp enough to cut steel, and exits as the patron saint of misfits who still believe forgiveness comes with a backbeat. He will eventually swap stimulants for scripture, but never forgets the electric itch that wrote Ring of Fire verses on the inside of his eyelids. Cash's wife June collected his scattered pills like Easter eggs and traded them for Bible verses, but temptation kept respawning in hotel ice buckets. He once crawled into a cave to die, according to legend, only to emerge days later sunburned and giddy, claiming God still needed a baritone. Reporters asked how it felt to be redeemed. He answered by biting into a microphone windscreen until foam crumbled between his teeth, then delivered a show that rattled the rafters. Everyone in the crowd felt forgiven, even those who had nothing to confess. Glenn Campbell puts a Hollywood smile on equally heavy secrets. Reality show cameras capture him misplacing lyrics while empty wine glasses crowd the coffee table, yet the rhinestone cowboy keeps riding until memory itself starts skipping like a scratched record. Jerry Lee Lewis is louder still, piano bench ablaze, prescription bottles rattling in every coat pocket, cousins whispering he might spontaneously combust on stage. When polite award shows invite him, he hurls jokes sharper than broken ivory keys and reminds anyone listening that gospel and sin share the same chord progression. Both men prove charisma can drown tremors, at least until the house lights fade. Campbell's final tours doubled as memory exercises. Teleprompters scrolled lyrics the world had tattooed on its heart, yet he sometimes read them like fresh poetry and wept mid-verse. Behind the curtain, his kids tuned guitars and whispered passwords that reminded him which city they were in. Jerry Lee survived so many medical near misses that tabloids printed a standing obituary draft. He flaunted every doctor's warning, pounding keys until knuckles bled, screaming that rock and roll could resurrect itself every night as long as you poured enough gasoline on the piano. While those flashier titans fought publicly, lesser-known studio aces spiraled between tape reels. Session drummer Richie Albright kept defibrillators closer than click tracks after snorting lines the width of drumsticks. Steel guitar savant Sneaky Pete would vanish for days, found eventually asleep under a Leslie cabinet with resin in his beard and an unfinished solo humming in his head. Producers learned to double-book musicians, wagering that at least half the lineup would arrive lucid enough to count off the first measure. Sometimes, the chaos forged miracles. A shaky hand would slide the fader a millimeter too far and invent a signature sound. Other times it forged funerals nobody attended because the family was too exhausted to plan another one. These behind-the-scenes casualties may not grace Hall of Fame plaques, but their fingerprints linger on every steel bend that makes you shiver during a heartbreak anthem. They prove that addiction is an ensemble instrument, able to solo or support, always in key with destruction. And they remind us that for every headline outlaw who survives long enough to sign memorabilia, there are 5 nameless sidemen whose entire biographies fit on a backstage pass. Not every battle makes front-page ink. Townes Van Zandt sits in a dim motel corridor flipping a coin and deciding whether heads or tails equals another night of the black tar lullaby. He writes lines about waiting around to die, then sells them at coffeehouse cover charge prices before disappearing into winter fog. Steve Earle spots his own reflection in that fog, checks into rehab, checks out, checks back in, finally surrenders, and reemerges swinging protest songs like lanterns that keep other strays from falling off the road. Their friendship shows that misery loves company, but recovery needs collaborators too. Townes once bet his entire show fee on a single game of 8-ball, lost, laughed, and played the set anyway, telling the bartender to add it to Destiny's tab. Steve Earle kept a photograph of that moment in his wallet during rehab, a reminder that genius and madness share wardrobe space. When Earle finally broke free, he saved the shoes he wore to court as a trophy, bronze sprayed them, and set them on his writing desk so every lyric had to walk past its own history. Marty Robbins raced stock cars on Sunday afternoon, then slid into hospital gowns on Monday morning after hidden prescriptions over-revved his heart. He kept the smile tight, the holsters shiny, and the Nashville rumor mill at arm's length while surgeons stitched new rhythm into his chest. Conway Twitty built an empire whispering about late-night rendezvous, but offstage aides guarded him like Secret Service agents, ferrying him past reporters whenever prescription fog dimmed his famous blue eyes. Freddie Fender, busted for a single joint in the 60s, tasted both punishment and pity. He later mixed liquor with pills until a minister's handshake pulled him toward gospel redemption. Charlie Rich, silver-maned glistening under footlights, once torched John Denver's CMA envelope live on television after too many backstage drinks, the open flame illuminating a face that had watched ambition wrestle addiction in every mirror for decades. Robbins, stitched together by surgeons, still insisted on driving race cars, arguing that adrenaline outran destiny. Twitty, in private, recorded voicemail messages for himself so he would recognize his own voice on days when tranquilizers fogged the mirror. Fender credited forgiveness, not discipline, for his rehabilitation, telling audiences that grace tasted sweeter than tequila. Rich's envelope-burning stunt eclipsed his chart success for years, yet he'd grin about it later, claiming sometimes a little fire keeps the room warm long after the spotlight cools. Stack these tales end to end and a brutal refrain emerges. Extraordinary talent often cruises toward oblivion with the cruise control jammed. Record labels counted profits while paramedics counted pulses, radios sanitized lyrics while tabloids plastered crime scene photos on breakfast tables. Fans kept buying tickets because disaster, when sung in perfect pitch, feels like permission to flirt with our own vices. Some of these icons clawed their way back, trading stage smoke for church pews and turning apologies into encore numbers. Others left nothing but cracked vinyl and gossip that still smells like stale beer. Either way, the jukebox keeps spinning, hungry for the next confession. Consult any actuarial table and you'll see the odds. Fame plus easy chemicals equals obituaries printed before the tour bus engine cools. Managers carry Narcan, insurance writers include detox clauses, and streaming platforms quietly append mental health hotlines beneath lyric videos. Meanwhile, record executive boardrooms decorate holiday parties with platinum plaques that smell faintly of hospital disinfectant. The business model remains intact because hope sells too. The idea that the next great voice might dodge every bullet and sing us clean. History, of course, loves a sequel. The pattern is so predictable that veteran journalists keep pre-written obituaries in desk drawers, changing only the date and the city. Young reporters, shocked by their first star's collapse, ask the veterans how they sleep at night. The answer is always the same: with earplugs. The sirens never stop. Statisticians even chart the phenomenon, noting that the average gap between breakout album and emergency hospitalization hovers around 7 years. Fans could set their watch by it if they had the heart. Walk any backstage hallway today and you'll hear new footsteps echo the old ones. Water bottles refilled with clear liquor, vitamin packs masking stronger stimulants, social feeds polishing images even as hands shake off camera. Security guards tape minibars shut, road managers hide car keys, and therapists ride tour buses like covert roadies. But temptation still knows the set list by heart. So when tomorrow's playlist pours through your headphones, ask which verses were financed by hospital bills and which riffs kept someone breathing one more night. Drop your wildest guess in the comments, hit subscribe for the next After Hours autopsy, and keep your own poisons in check. Because the neon serpent above that lonely tavern will flicker forever, auditioning new legends. And the entry fee hasn't changed a dime since Hank's last ride through that freezing dawn. Stay vigilant, because glitter can camouflage broken glass. If you find yourself romanticizing the bottle tilted in a vintage promo photo, remember the emergency room wristband just outside the frame. And if a backstage autograph session ever feels too perfect, listen closer. You might hear a distant siren harmonizing with the cheers. The show always ends, but the echo can follow you home. Stay safe, keep listening, and come back for the stories the stage lights tried and failed to bury. And remember, music may save souls, but it has no warranty card. You must service your own engine, change the oil of your habits, and pull over when the dashboard lights flash. Write your anthem.